I train a lot of my mental health friends. If you hear shame, loop the chaplain in so they can do a little bit of screening for moral injury. If you hear more
Mm.
guilt and fear, that's probably going to be more PTSD. But if the guilt starts to pivot a little bit more
Huh.
over the fear hypervigilance, check in on the moral injury component.
This week's episode is brought to you by Teamworks. If you have performance data scattered across apps, spreadsheets, group chats, it means things get missed. Teamworks brings it all together. Training, nutrition, scheduling, communication, all in one platform built for the people responsible for readiness. Learn more today at teamworkstactical.com.
Team, welcome to another episode of the Mops and Mo's podcast. And before we kick things off, apparently there's a little bit of news in the sponsorship world. NFL.
I'm shocked that Drew did not know.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
This is earth-shaking news. I'm sure Drew will Google it once I start talking.
I'm not going to do that. Unless you want me to.
We'll see. I bet you do.
Okay, I'll do it now.
The followers will know that there's been a little bit of a turf war in the crustless prepackaged sandwich industry. Uncrustables kind of dominated that space for an extended period of time.
Oh, I'm reading this now.
Had a functional monopoly on the space. People may have seen news in the last couple of years that Uncrustables were massively popular with NFL teams.
80,000 Uncrustables annually.
Yeah,
the NFL
pretty huge consumption of Uncrustables. I will as just doing lots of trail stuff in Colorado. Uncrustables massively popular with that community as well. But I believe within the last couple of weeks, Jams has unseated Uncrustables as the official crustless prepackaged sandwich of the NFL. I think it was negotiations with the NFLPA that led to this. I think Jams essentially brought a few popular NFL players on board to be part of their team, and Uncrustables totally got lost their dominance of the NFL space, and we'll see what happens. I personally have not had any Jams yet. I have seen them. They're always at Costco. They're in the freezer next to the Uncrustables. I don't know if I have brand loyalty or not, but
this is gonna. I don't know if this will shock you or not. I don't think I've ever had one of these.
Drew operates an ingredients household. He doesn't really do the ultra processed foods.
Even before that, I know, obviously I know what these things are, and maybe I've had one or two, but I can't I don't know, something about them is just weird to me. It's like a giant gusher with bread.
Sure. You do keep them frozen. And I will say, if you time it
I saw that actually. Is that a thing? Do you eat frozen Uncrustables?
No. So
do they freeze?
They freeze. They do freeze.
Okay.
This is a point of contention between me and my fiance, frankly. She likes them when they're still frozen, which I think is crazy.
That's crazy.
I think it's all about nailing the timing where it's thawed out. Because the way I use them is you throw them in the hydration vest and then you head out on the hike or the run or whatever, and you eat it at some point during it.
Sure.
If you get the timing just right, where it has melted but not gotten to room temperature, perfect.
Interesting. I think maybe this is because of the ingredients. I am an absolute stickler when it comes to peanut butter. Sure. I refuse to buy peanut butter that has more than one ingredient, which is peanuts. I mean, I'll do the ones that have salt, which is fine. But if somebody, I don't know, not to go down a rabbit hole, but if you want to be shocked by just the amount of junk that gets snuck into seemingly basic ingredients, spend some time in the peanut butter aisle. It's absurd how much they sneak into these things and still call it peanut butter.
Have you seen the picture of Nutella if you stratified the ingredients by volume?
Oh, I'm sure it's
shocking.
Bad. Yeah. There's that dude on that Instagram guy who breaks down stuff by how much sugar is in it or whatever. Have you seen this guy?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna ask you to Google one more thing during this intro. Can you Google Nutella ingredients and then click over to images?
I don't want to know because my daughter loves Nutella.
I love Nutella too.
I'm not a big Nutella guy. Palm oil. People. Oh, I see. Ugh. Gross. Gross. Not very many hazelnuts, team. But But hey, you know what? Speaking of somebody who's incredibly authentic, and not full of shit, who do we have this week?
Solid transition, Drew.
Thank you.
This week we have Libby Alders. She is a tri-vocational nerd who has built her career on talking about the intersection of religion, politics, health, and social movements. She's worked as a chaplain, as a senior research associate, and as a library technician. In her own words, this makes her great for podcasts and questionable for dinner parties. She earned her Master of Divinity from Vanderbilt University with a focus on political theology and theologies of disability, then completed her clinical pastoral education residency and earned her Master of Science in Patient Counseling at Virginia Commonwealth University Medical Center, focusing on serving the inpatient psychiatry populations in the emergency room. After residency, she spent the next decade navigating life as a military spouse while supporting the spiritual fitness research efforts at the Consortium of Health and Military Performance, that's CHAMP. It actually recently got folded up under ARMOR, so acronyms are changing, keeps you on your toes.
Charmer.
Also worked with the Research Transition Office at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. And when not working, she can be found introverting in her home gym or serving as operations manager of her household of 1 retired 18 Bravo and 2 Belgian Malinois.
And she lives pretty close to me, which is fun. Team, we've been chasing the spiritual pillar now for some time. And I think the conversation you're about to hear is unique because of the perspective that she's able to provide, having now kind of stepped away from some of the more researchy space. I, for one, didn't know all of the, I didn't know all of the stuff or the context around the conversations that we're about to dive into. I mean, spiritual fitness sounds cool, but what is it? So I think as is always the case when we've had this type of individual come on the podcast to talk about not just spirituality, but like what truly drives a lot of these things. Fascinating conversation.
We've been, like Drew said, we've been trying to crack into this spiritual domain a little bit, in particular from the angle of our podcast is called MOPS and MOs, Measures of Performance, Measures of Effectiveness. The spiritual domain is uniquely hard to measure. Libby is uniquely qualified to help us understand ways they've attempted to measure it in the past, which is a theme throughout the conversation. You'll hear a little bit of that. But we do kind of find ourselves to some degree returning to the Hammond corollary.
There we go.
The old what gets measured gets managed, but not everything that needs managing is measurable. And I think the spiritual fitness piece, I think it's somewhat superficially obvious that like how you derive meaning, purpose, and value is a crucial component of your overall holistic health, wellness, fitness, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, diving into that here today.
ADHD riffing.
Oh my God. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are y'all?
I'm good. Man, I had like a thought on where I wanted to start this, and then you just came in slinging darts.
I'm also good. You guys already know each other.
Yeah.
Libby, I think we've probably been on Teams calls together before related to like CHAMP or WPO things at some point.
Yes. Because
I definitely recognized your name when Drew brought it up. That's all I know.
Yeah, because I think I was on the spirituality research team when you were like floating through CHAMP. There was multiple teams at CHAMP. They put me in
I
the
did.
corner.
That is a good description of what I did at CHAMP. I interned there briefly and just kind of floated around.
I mean, I worked there for 6 years and kind of floated around.
That's kind of what we're all doing anyway.
Yeah, no.
Can we start? I'm setting my screen up here.
Hold on. Drew actually knows what we're going to talk about in this episode. I'm coming to this entirely unprepared.
Okay.
But so like, I'm going to take this chance and sneak in. I want to sneak in my one question.
Okay.
And this is just going back to like seconds before we hit record.
Okay.
You said you would like to create a podcast called Rants and Rituals.
Yeah.
Tell me the concept. Let's go.
That's such a sick name.
No one take it. It's halfway through the trademark. No one take it. No. So the last 7 months or so, I've had what I've gotten to call a fourth sabbatical. I got caught up in some of the reorganization that has happened in the research world.
Yes.
That's the way I'll phrase it. So I am looking at starting a certified pastoral counseling office in North Carolina because it's one of the few states that allows for pastoral counselors to operate similar to mental health, but a little different. So it's kind of like a chaplain, but with a mental health office setup. It's a little different. But I wanted to do a podcast with that called Rants and Rituals because I really want to start talking to professions in different fields because the things I've noticed working on cross-functional teams is we don't know really anything about other professions. Like we're all very confused as to what everybody does.
Yep.
So, I mean, I come from the profession of chaplain, which no one knows what we do. Like there's a bunch of stereotypes and nobody has a good idea. So I wanted to do a podcast, Rants and Rituals, bring some of your favorite things about your profession, and then bring like your 2 or 3 biggest headaches. They could be funny ones, it could be big, serious issues, but just take time for people to just rant, like productive rant. So that's what my thought behind the podcast. I'm hoping to launch that in August. So
Okay.
Dang, heard it here first, team. Can I ask, what are your favorite things and biggest headaches about?
oh no, I set myself up for that one.
You did. Hi, welcome to Rants and Rituals. I'd like to ask you quickly.
Okay. So my absolute favorite thing for the whole chaplain profession is like, should you choose to be, you will never be bored, and like you will acquire the most random knowledge and skill set possible. So I love that. What I really rant against all day long is it is one of the most gate-kept professions. So it's incredibly difficult to get into, particularly for minorities or women. You have to have you have to have support from multiple different sources and get them to align all at once. So we have to have something called an endorser. And then your endorser has to support you. You have to go through boards. So for my training, I got my undergraduate degree. I got my Master of Divinity, which is a 3-year program. So I had to work my way through 7 years of college. Then I did a chaplain residency for 1 year at a level 1 trauma center where I ran my own research project and was an associate investigator on it. And then I still was not qualified to sit for chaplain boards. So I've done the residency. I've got 8 years of training and education, right? Can't sit for my boards because you need to do another 2,000 hours, but no hospital will pay you until you're certified. So you have to do 2,000 hours volunteer more often than not. So in other words, you're looking at 2 years of unpaid work. Like,
Jeez.
so that's my biggest rant is like you really have to have some financial support and your religious tradition really has to back you because the most I ever made as a chaplain was $30,000 a year. Like, yeah.
I want to ask a crazy question. And
Okay.
I'm sure this will eventually get into like conversations about like spiritual fitness, spiritual health, all that kind of stuff. But you brought up the concept of the endorser in the chaplaincy.
Yes.
And in particular, like that means, correct me if I'm wrong, the government has a list of approved endorsers, correct?
Yeah, that list.
Can you convince me that that's constitutional?
Wait, what?
Can I convince you that?
Before you convince him, can you explain what he just talked about?
I love how this is turning into like Libby should have gone to law school. So next time I'll connect you to my friend that's a chaplain and a lawyer. Best of both worlds. No, so the endorser, you're correct. It's a list. So the best Libby is not a lawyer explanation of it is this. So the government wants to recognize that there are things and like rules and regulations that each religious tradition will have that they don't have full knowledge of. So the way to think of the endorser list is like almost like there's identifiers in the military of like specific skills. The endorser list kind of acts that way. Like I will never be endorsed to be Catholic. Spoiler alert. Like I can't be a Catholic priest. I don't know if that's incredibly obvious. So I would never have that endorser. So that means I would not be able to do anything like of those religious rituals belonging to that tradition. So the endorsers kind of take on the liability and also identify who can rep them in the military sphere. Because the chaplain is kind of weird. We're providing freedom of religion by like the government, which is It's constitutional-ish. Because the other option is then you don't have any official recognized experts and you don't have anyone claiming liability over these chaplains. And then you could have me come in and I would absolutely love causing chaos by like repping things that I couldn't rep, so then you would have that issue. But the government side, the military side wouldn't be able to understand who doesn't have those skills. Like, so it's not not the greatest comparison, but it's kind of similar to how doctors have to go through different boards to get certified, and those boards are the best to make that criteria. That's kind of what the endorser list does. Does that make sense? Whether or not it's constitutional, I'm going to pass that off to my chaplain friend, Jennifer Lane, who's a lawyer.
I did not
handle that one.
I honestly never really thought about how you even. I never thought to. I should have asked Chris that question in the mini dinners that we had.
Well, and then you'll get the Chris answer, which
That's a good point.
To be fair, Chris and I are great examples of how we're both chaplains in like vastly different ways to show up as chaplains. So.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, hard pivot.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you about like what is spiritual fitness, and I'm just going to turn it over, go wild, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, that's a dangerous thing to tell me, but okay.
Yep,
so,
exactly.
First of all, I did not coin the term spiritual fitness. I inherited that. So I just want to get that off of my liability there. Don't yell at me, people, for it. The idea of spiritual fitness in the military is basically, and this is how I taught it to people, is do you know what you believe? Like, and not like cute, fluffy beliefs like hot dogs are superior to hamburgers. I'm talking like, what do you believe about interacting with people of different faiths? What are your deeply held values? Like, what are the things that get you up in the morning and that you'll defend or sacrifice for? Like, what's your religious tradition? Do you have one or not? Like, what do you think about the supernatural or sacred? Is that even on your radar? So knowing what that is, because if you don't know it, especially the military, like we've learned someone else is going to tell you what to believe, and that rarely works out well for like a fully functional adult. So especially in the age of like the red pill movement online, where people haven't thought through what they believe, they're going online, social media, they're getting kind of told what to believe that isn't necessarily the healthiest, if that makes sense. So spiritual fitness is looking at what are your core beliefs. So for me, I said, do you know what they are? Do you know it's healthy for your beliefs to change as you grow and mature? Like, you're not supposed to have your same worldview that you had at 6 as you do at 26. Hopefully you don't. If you do, let me know how it's going when you develop it. And then my third rule for spiritual fitness was, do you know how to disagree with people and get along with people who are different? AKA, don't be a jerk about your beliefs. You can coexist. And the fourth one I always taught, because spiritual fitness is unique to the military context. Like, I would not have this discussion outside of the military because it's all of the research and construction, theoretical construction is in that environment. But the fourth rule I always had was, can you recognize like unhelpful or harmful ideologies, particularly like fascism, recruitment for religious terrorism is one. So it's kind of that, especially the military standpoint, are we kind of doing things to help protect you from radicalization of all kinds? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess my question is like, how do you measure that? Do you capture that? How do you, because when I hear the word fitness, right, I think like, oh, there must be a series of tests.
Right. So yeah, you just described like 5 years of my career with that
there
question.
You go. Glad you're here.
So there are ways to measure things, such as particularly like religiosity and health is measured a lot by Dr. Harold Koenig at Duke, who's particularly if you're looking at the overlap of mental health, physical health, and spiritual health, is him and Dr. Warren Kinghorn are two names you need to know. Because they look a lot at that intersection of the three. But there are ways to measure things like religiosity. We do look at, like, there are some measures I'm not as familiar with for looking for radicalization. Because that, weirdly, I have become very knowledgeable on recognizing cult behavior. That was not something I thought I would pick up when I went to
Netflix would
school.
love you.
God, I hope they never find me. I'm good. My life is quiet and I like it that way. But yeah, so you have some of those measures. And then I worked when I went to Champ, I was brought on to be a research assistant for a project called the Spiritual Fitness Metric. So Special Operations Command, POTF, or Preservation of the Force and Family. I think they're still called that. I don't know what acronym they are. Okay. They wanted to find a way to kind of measure spiritual fitness, at least in their context. So we tried to do psychometric development. Like we did a planned missing data model, had teams of biostatisticians to come in and take a lot of questions from chaplaincy measures, psychology, religion measures, and some sociology. Had about a pool of 1,000 questions.
Jeez.
Distributed that to the entire SOCOM population. So that was fun. And had them take it, which they were very confused. I got a lot of phone calls from my husband's friends being like, why are you sending me this? I'm going to blame you because it says spiritual and you're the only person we know who does this. Yeah, so we created that metric. And it's kind of gone through some iterations because doing anything that big on a psychometric level, you're going to have like different iterations of it. But we created 3 different subscales with it. So the idea was looking at, do people have spiritual fitness at a horizontal level? So that's like your community level. Do you have friends? Do you have a group of people that you can be open with about what you believe? Not necessarily agree or disagree, but like find community and support and have people also hold you accountable when you need it. Like that kind of, that's the horizontal spiritual fitness measure. Then we had the mixed, which was the purpose and meaning spiritual measure. So that was the mixed scale. Not quite all vertical, not quite all horizontal. That's the stuff of like, where's your sense of purpose coming from? What are your core values? Where do you derive meaning? So that scale, and that's where a lot of people hear spiritual fitness. They think my source of meaning or how I make meaning. That scale would hit it. So we measured that. Those 2 came out pretty well on the constructs. The vertical was the one we had to do multiple iterations on. So the vertical scale is dealing with everything that we call, like, some people might say supernatural, some people might say sacred, other people might say transcendent. Basically, it's what do you believe about the divinity? Do you believe in a God or gods, plural? Like, do you not care? So that was measuring where you at. Not that we're not looking for a right belief. We're looking at, do you know what you believe, and is it kind of aligning with how you live your life? Or are there some big dissonances? Like, are you claiming to be incredibly Christian, but we've noticed you have no support group, never talk to anyone, and never seek out the chaplain? That would be a disconnect that we would send the chap in to figure out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to like narrow this in for a second.
Yeah.
So she mentioned like 1,000 questions and dialing it into the 3 scales, and the survey as I know it, or the spiritual fitness scale as I know it, is 18 questions.
Yeah, we got it down to 18.
10 that everybody answers, and then another 8 where you get to decide whether it aligns with your worldview. You can break down the scores into the 3 scales she mentioned. My question on the scale, like I've seen the scale. My team almost implemented it, but then we decided to back off of like surveys as a thing we were going to be super heavy on.
Yeah.
But have the results of that scale been like validated with any kind of outcomes? Like, has that work been done?
So that work was in process. And then the last few years, I think is the way I'll phrase it. So it's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle as reorgs have happened. I do know they did some work with some outcomes, particularly on the meeting scale. I want to say Dr. Doyster and Josh Kasman did some work coming out. And we had already seen that using that meeting scale would really help with mental health collaboration was kind of the biggest outcome we saw. Because when you're working with cross-functional teams, you're trying to have chaplain and psych talk to each other. Sometimes there's this weird, like, nobody knows who's responsible for what. Like, it's like we're all soccer players on the field, but we forgot who the goalie was, is kind of the analogy I use. People forget their positions. And we found the tool really helpful for that because psychology can deal with meaning making. It is incredibly helpful for that. But when you start to veer to some of that more existential or some of that religious programming, the training isn't there on the psych side. So the meeting tool in particular, we found really helpful in outcomes for communication on like, when does the chaplain need to come in because there's some subtle theological issue bubbling to the surface. And it kind of looks like mental health, but it's really like a harmful belief system happening. or is it more PTSD and we need to let the psych people handle that with some evidence-based treatment from there? And so that was one outcome that really popped. The horizontal scale was tied to some similar outcomes that researchers have found, which is that religion and spirituality is tied to overall better health, but it's not because of your believing any specific thing. It's because you have a group of people that you feel supported
Hmm.
by. So the horizontal scale also we found incredibly helpful with outcomes related to social fitness in that domain. So like talking with social workers, figuring out like, do we have healthy or unhealthy community? Like what type of community might they most benefit from? Like, are they having to navigate because they've outgrown their old community in a very healthy way, but they don't know how to find a new one? That's the one we see a lot in the military where they've kind of outgrown like their beliefs from their hometown and they don't know how to pivot to find a new healthy community. Uh, the vertical scale is the one that needed a little bit because the construct validity on it's pretty solid if you split it between people who believe in a deity and people who don't. So theist and non-theist.
Hmm.
But if you try to use the vertical scale for both populations the same, the construct validity kind of understandably went down. Meaning like the two populations read the same questions totally differently, got different takeaways from it. But we found that outcome really tied well to people who are kind of what we'd call spiritual but not religious, like the nuns, the NONES is how the Pew Research Center would categorize them.
Hmm.
They responded well to the vertical being offered because you'd be surprised at the number of people who don't know if they're theist or not. So like just even running through the questions and then being like, okay, no, I don't believe in any kind of deity or supernatural thing, and that would help too. So that was tied more to like discernment for people really early on in their spiritual fitness formation, but further outcomes are still pending. I want to say chaplain David Alexander in the Navy was running that one with some validation studies, but that was 2023, which feels like a decade ago.
Forever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The other piece of that question I want to ask you, you mentioned like conflict between chaplain and mental health within
Yeah.
interdisciplinary teams. And I just like 2 hours ago, I was reading something about like siloing between domains within interdisciplinary teams. And I understand the criticism, like it shouldn't be siloed. These are interdisciplinary. They're like the domains are inextricably linked to each other. But in reality, like because we are humans trying to build systems to help other humans, eventually certain issues have to be certain people's thing to go
Yes.
address.
Yes.
And so I am a little curious about like, I don't know if you have an answer. I don't even know if I have a coherent question here. I'll try. But when like, I think it's like superficially obvious that spiritual fitness is to a significant degree interwoven with several other domains, but perhaps most prominently mental, social, like how I don't think we want those to get separated. Like they should be connected, but how do we handle that in a support team situation?
That's a phenomenal question. I'm not sure if I'll have a coherent
Nice,
answer,
Alex.
but I'll have some rambling. We'll see if my rambling produces anything. I feel like that's a very chaplain response. Let me not give you a direct answer. Let me take you on a journey.
Strength coaches do that too, to be fair.
So like my very first thought is this. Like I there's always a trap between either getting so overgeneralized nobody knows who's calling the play to like way too specialized you can't have anybody move like outside of a very specific niche. The example I always throw out is like when I would have nothing but PhD people on a research team and I was the only master level research associate. It's a choice because you don't have anybody to kind of balance out all that niche stuff. So agree with you 100% on the fact of sometimes somebody's just got to own it and say, hey, this is our thing. Like we have the training in it. Uh, Let us roll with it. We'll bring you in. So one great example of kind of how this works out on interdisciplinary teams is not so much cross training to do the function, but to do what I call informed consumer. So to kind of start training people to recognize like, oh, I thought this was my thing, but I now know like these are some key phrases that I should probably loop the chaplain in for the opinion. Or like the chaplain would be like, that's a nutrition problem. That sounds a little like an eating disorder. Let me get the registered dietitian in. Because believe it or not, nutrition and spirituality overlap a ton. Like that's overlooked a lot. A lot. But being able to train people up so they can recognize. And so like one thing that I think is kind of timely, and we're going to really be testing it, is moral injury got added to the DSM, which it's a choice. I am not the foremost researcher on that piece of it, and I could see some value in having it in the DSM, particularly because moral injury and PTSD are like the worst best friends you could hang out with, and they like to co-occur. So we'll often see, like a lot of times I'll see mental health professionals being like, we've got them 90% on this PhD, but there's like this one piece of it that they're just not moving past and they're stuck. And well, it's a little bit more shame based. Typically, like I train a lot of my mental health friends. If you hear shame, loop the chaplain in so they can do a little bit of screening for moral injury. If you hear more guilt and fear, that's probably going to be more PTSD. But if the guilt starts to pivot a little bit more over the fear hypervigilance, check in on the moral injury component. So, because there's also a lot of studies that say supposedly religion and spirituality is super helpful for preventing or lessening the effect of PTSD. I think I disagree with that because I don't think those studies took out the confounding factor of moral injury. Because moral injury is when you have a deep violation across your core belief. So if you have something that's super great and meaning making and wonderful for you, I think what we didn't realize for a long time in the military was that also means you have an opening. Like, so if you are a family person and that is why you get up and go to work, that is why you're trying to do your 20 years in the military so you can retire and get back, and then heaven forbid, like something happens to your kid while you're on deployment, like that, and that one happens a lot. Like you're not there to be there to support your family. Your kid went through a horrific medical trauma and you couldn't be there. You're on a deployment that you hate. Like you have that kind of come in. And so I think we're kind of starting to see that maybe religion and spirituality, like anything else, is bidirectional. It can have some really helpful things, and it can also, when it goes bad, it goes super bad. So to kind of pull that back to how the teams can work together is really just kind of educating. So like chaplains learning a little bit about like how do eating disorders show up in men in particular, because I think that is an area that we don't look at nearly enough in the military. Especially as they start using things like hormones and testosterone and the nutrition isn't quite on point. And then you're like, oh, this is all getting real not great. Tied into views of masculinity, and then you add trauma. So you pulling in the nutritionist, the psych support, and the chaplain for those issues. But they need to learn each other's buzzwords. Does that make sense? I don't know if that totally answered your question or was a ramble.
It makes a ton of sense. I'm going to like try and steer this ship past a couple potential rabbit holes and then hand it off to Drew.
Yeah,
these
I'm
are
right there with you.
These are like risky of going deep. One, I will shout out Matt Larson, former podcast guest, Combatives guy, gave a great moral injury talk at the H2F symposium. I don't know if that video is posted yet, but I highly recommend it. I'll throw it up on our Instagram and stuff when it comes out. But the second one, like you described it as informed consumer, and I think you gave a good description of what I think the goal is, because I've seen there's two ends to the spectrum, and I think it's easier for people to understand if we stick to like physical fitness and nutrition as an example. I have seen teams where dietitians will freak out if a coach even talks about macronutrients or like calories, right? Like they're gonna like that's nutrition. Coaches shouldn't talk about that. Stop. Like I have witnessed that on interdisciplinary teams.
But
the other end of the spectrum is coaches trying to do medical nutrition therapy or giving out crazy, terrible advice in situations where they are not qualified.
Right.
And neither of those is the answer. The answer is understanding when it's like a low level thing that you can converse about on the fringes of your domain and you're fine.
Yeah.
And then knowing those key words for when to transition it. And I think like, absolutely. I think interdisciplinary teams in general could get better about helping each other understand where those lines are and when it's time to do handoffs.
Yeah. So like to kind of pull a little bit further on that, like I've done a lot of volunteer work or just I'm also a spouse. So like I sometimes accidentally become the spouse that chaplain to spouses. I was like, but so that like I'm not a registered dietitian and my nutrition knowledge is like not great. Like grew up Baptist. We don't believe in macros. Like what? Like you just eat food.
That's
Um
so true.
but I've become informed enough to know, like, especially as women have some different health needs, like, and I start hearing buzzwords. So if I hear a woman who's like, I have the new name for it is polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. Used to be known as PCOS. Thankfully, they finally changed it. If I hear that and then I hear them saying they're skipping meals and like they're not worried about protein, I'll kind of come in. I'm like, I'm not an expert, but like, did you know that there's a really great registered dietitian and you can go through TRICARE for her and she specializes in this? So it's like that bit of informed knowledge of like don't try to PR your deadlift when you're not even hitting 100 grams of protein. Like you could. I'm not an expert in nutrition or weightlifting, but I know enough to know that sounds like not a good idea. Like,
Mhm.
so I think to your point, like knowing enough to kind of like call an audible. The way I think of it is like calling an audible and be like, "Mm, okay, I've left my scope of practice, but I know enough and I've got a great thread. Like, let me pull a bit."
Mhm.
The other one I don't want to forget, and I've been doing too many rabbit holey things here, but this is the last one for now. You mentioned additions to the DSM.
Yeah.
I want to take one more chance. I've probably done this like I'd probably do this like one episode a month or something.
Try to get that guy on.
Yeah, our white whale
You've
guest.
done
I
this
have,
over a dozen times. Yeah.
like eventually somebody's going to hear this and find him because they actually have comms with him. He's impossible to get in touch with. A guy named Alan Francis out of Duke University wrote a book called Saving Normal. Strongly recommend. It'll piss a lot of people off if they read it, but it's like in a good way. He participated in the creation of DSM-3. He chaired the committee for the creation of DSM-4. And by the time we got to DSM-5, he had renounced the thing entirely as like actively harmful and bad for humanity.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just say as from all three hats that I wear, chaplain, researcher, library technician, and the fourth hat of being a woman, the DSM I've never looked at and been like, I feel safe. I feel like this was tested on people that look like
This
me.
is good.
This is going to be like, it's more like this is the mechanism to get insurance to TRICARE to actually try to care, as we always joke.
Ooh, I like that.
Spouse life, like no TRICARE, I need you to pay for this. It was medically necessary that I talked to someone. Like, I would love to get. Yeah, you should honestly try seeing if you can go through Dr. Harold Koenig because he's also at Duke. So,
there you
anyways, that would be my rec. But if
is Dr. Koenig like the chaplaincy's favorite PhD?
Sort of. So he's also super connected because he was one of the first people to even do research on like spirituality, religion, and mental health. So he's a geriatric psychiatrist by practice. And he runs his own yearly, like, does it at cost week-long training seminar on how to do research on spirituality, religion, and health. I know I went to it. I'm pretty sure Chris Picorni went to it. Like most of the Air Force chaplains kind of started swinging into that because you learn how to do like really rigorous evidence-based approaches. And you also learn like some of the controversies behind the DSM and how it hasn't really been validated across a lot of populations. And he is not a liberation psychology expert, but he kind of some of his stuff's helped kind of ground that movement. So he's one of our favorite go-to researchers. Rush University and Virginia Commonwealth University are the two that I know of. They're the two universities with PhDs for chaplain research. They're the only ones that existed. So you can now like earn a PhD in like chaplaincy research work. But yeah, but that's new. Like that's within the last, I want to say, decade or two that they've offered that. So yeah, that's That is the weird nuance of the chaplain profession. Like, I don't know if that answered all your questions with the DSM stuff, but yeah.
Team, this episode of Mops and Mo's is brought to you by Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a reliable, well-designed platform for programming, tracking, and communicating with athletes. If you've been with us for any length of time, you will know that Train Heroic is the platform that we use to power our own training, long and strong, which you can find at our website, mopsandmos.com. If you're looking for a solid platform to support your own coaching, whether it's your full-time role or a side hustle, Train Heroic is definitely worth checking out. You can use the link in any of our show notes, you can find it in our newsletter, or you can head to our website, mopsandmos.com/training to get your first week for free. Team, we all sleep. We all conduct a bunch of activities, we all train, and we all recover from stress. Teamworks pulls it all together in real-time readiness dashboards because when data is connected, readiness follows. Visit teamworkstactical.com today to learn more.
I want to ask, so like we've been playing around a little bit, Alex and I, with the idea of like how might we reconstruct or re-envision for H2F specifically the 5 pillars, but I think every embedded team kind of has a similar structure.
Yeah.
And if I may be so bold as to say, it always feels as though the spiritual pillar is like the weird one that we're kind of afraid of because so my question for you is social cohesion is one that we've been really looking at a lot lately. And based on everything you just kind of went through, it seems as though we recognize social cohesion as kind of the glue that holds all of this together. And that kind of falls within the auspices of a chaplain. Do they own that space? And could that give chaplains in this world a little bit more of like a foundation to exist in a human performance team, if that makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think I don't want to leave our social worker friends out of the conversation.
That's a good point. No, that's a good point.
But then also some chaplains go to the dark side and become social workers. They know who they are. And anyways.
He's listening. I know he's listening. I know he's listening because I was texting him about this.
So, like, I think, that is one place. I do think that if you're going to look at that, like, how can you kind of bring people in? The number one thing I noticed for interdisciplinary teams is people don't genuinely acknowledge the weird of each profession. And I mean that as a compliment. Because if you really, like, from the outside, strength and conditioning does some stuff that I'm like,
the most amount of weird stuff.
I mean, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but like, okay, I mean, sure.
Sometimes no.
I deal with some woo-woo, so I can't judge. Like, but I do think I would take it a little bit further, and one thing that interdisciplinary teams really need, and this worked pretty well when I was on interdisciplinary medical teams in the hospital, was start training on like specific kind of connect points. So if you're talking about an interdisciplinary team, but don't offer any ways to which people can connect, and through like concrete examples. So like eating disorders and punishment theology is what we did a lot in the hospitals because if you're chasing perfection, if you have a theology that teaches you being unhealthy is evil, you're going to be more prone to eating disorders because you're trying to avoid the condemnation for your religious beliefs. It's actually way more common in the evangelical South. Like, we're starting to learn a little bit about it. Again, I'm not an eating disorder expert. I just know from the chaplain side of the house, I have referred a lot of people to registered dietitians for evaluation because of this. But we use that as kind of a really concrete example of like, here's where everybody meets. Like, this is an intersection. This is an example. Now I'm thinking of the giant circle of doom and Pinehurst. People, if you live here, like teach people how to actually use a traffic circle. And that's kind of what you need to do on the interdisciplinary piece is like, everybody's going to have to enter the traffic circle, teach them how and when to enter and what they bring to it, and then when to get out the way. Like, I don't need to hover while the dietitian does their thing or the strength and conditioning coach does their thing. But if I see someone overtraining from my chaplain side because they're like avoiding dealing with some big stuff, I could go talk to the strength and conditioning coach and the psych person and just be like, maybe I'm overreading it, but maybe you should do your thing and go walk by and check on them, like do a drive-by. So I think to really build those interdisciplinary pieces, two things I would approach: own the weird. Like, one thing I always do when I do chaplain work is like, I'm weird. Like, my job is helping people figure out, do they believe in the divine or do they think it's a flying spaghetti monster? Both are equally viable options. Like, I talk to people about really super traumatic things and then go off on tangents about like theology and Lord of the Rings. I never know what Mane's going to bring. It's weird.
Nice.
If you own it and then move into examples of how you can relate to others, like what are some of the spiritual fitness and mental fitness things behind kind of the David Goggins mindset and overtraining? And when you're working with people with propensity to overtrain, how can you guys work together to make sure, like, okay, we get it, the gym is like your safe space, but like, how do we train intelligently? Well, helping you cope. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, and you're getting at something that Alex, we kind of talked about this last week at the symposium. I mean, what I'm getting at here is, and this is, no offense to all of the providers and specialists out there, but we kind of all exist on the surface level of what the science says, and
Yeah.
the human comes in and they fit the model, and here's the reps and the sets or the meal plan or the thing. And it seems as though the chaplain, when you've got like a high-speed chaplain in that space, kind of gets to the second and third level of
Yeah.
this, like the human element, which we've been like clamoring about.
Yeah.
How do you, I guess the question I want to ask here is, like, for all the teams out there that have a spiritual component, they may have a good chaplain, they may have a bad chaplain, but like, how do you foster this? Is that too vague?
It's not. I'm just thinking of how to answer because, like,
Yeah.
I'm stuck in I know there's like a psych term for it, but like, I've been training as a chaplain since the age of 14. So I'm like
Oh,
24
geez.
years into this. So I'm like trying to go back to like the early, that sounds really arrogant, but like I'm trying to go back
Yeah.
to the early part of it. And so a lot of the and I think really if you want to integrate the chaplains in, that's the way you really bring them in. Now that you say that, is we get down to like, we like science, we value science, but we
Hmm.
see who science has not yet reached. And so like I like to say, like, chaplains are really good at living at the edge of science. So they can kind of pull it to get those populations that quite they haven't been really discovered, or the studies haven't been there to back up, and they can still bring in that science as they do it with the scientific mindset. So what you have to do though is approach it as the human, and with a qualitative, like my qualitative backing with training as active listener as a chaplain is kind of how I do it to become
Mm.
that more high speed, get to that second and third level, where quantitative is great, but if you don't have context for it, it's going to be useless all day long. And qual is super great, but until you can expand it out, you don't know how far you can generalize it. So quat situates it. So if you pull both together and let qual guide you to the human, is really how you get to that second and third level. You got to listen to stories. You've got to listen for the uniqueness. Take time, which I know in the military, everyone's like, we don't have time. 10 minutes of somebody going and really active listening will give you weeks of data, like, to work off of. Me as a chaplain, you give me 15 minutes with someone and I've got 3 months worth of pastoral counseling we can discuss, because it's just I've honed how to do that qualitative interviewing style down. Like, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, you've created now more questions, because
what I do.
one of the things that seems very like a recurring discussion that we hear in our space is, how can we quantitatively capture the spiritual pillar? What data can we collect? What metrics? Blah, 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 blah. But it sounds like leaning into the qualitative aspect is where the money is. So I guess, again, struggling for like a concise question, because there's a million places I want to go. But how do you, here's a big one. How do you change the culture of an organization like the military to accept the qualitative importance of the chaplaincy without trying to shove quantitative metrics onto it?
So that's a great question. And like,
Thank you.
that's really kind of what we did with the spirituality performance research team when I worked with Chris at the 724th, because we had the metric of the spiritual fitness metric.
Yeah.
But we noticed, as we still hadn't done the validity work, we didn't have outcomes, so we couldn't tell the leadership that, hey, we had a validated metric. But we had time, money, COVID hit, and we were like, we have the time to do a really deep dive focus group, talk to everybody and figure out the basics of spiritual fitness. Like, do we even have the right language and all of that? So we said, hey, we want to approach it by taking this metric and also doing some focus groups to see, like, is this language even vibing? Like, are they understanding what we're even asking? Can we get a baseline deep dive of when they hear spiritual fitness? What would they like it to mean? What would they find helpful? Like, let the community tell us. And so we told them, you give us 7 focus groups, we'll come back with enough data, and this metric will turn into a collaboration tool. So that's how we created it to be more of not a formal metric to measure like spiritual fitness per se, but it became a communication tool for the chaplain to talk with the service member so they could gauge their own spiritual fitness, but then for also the chaplain to kind of run over to some other disciplines to be like, hey, they've had a major drop on their horizontal. Are you seeing like anything like depression pop up? Are they not eating enough? That kind of, it may not be a bad change. We don't know because it doesn't say, it's not that kind of metric. Like a change isn't good or bad. It's just a change. So then we did the focus groups. And we ended up having the leadership of the 724th asked to do their own because they saw the value in it so much. Everybody at the unit was talking about it. They were like, we sat down and we thought it'd be really weird, and it was actually really helpful. And nobody's ever bothered to stop and ask us, like, what do we need when we run into moral issues? What does spiritual fitness look like in our job? Because we weren't trying to generalize it out so it worked for everybody. We were like, we're coming in to take care of your people, hear their stories. This will be good for your people. And we could do it. And we gave them the budget and they were like, that's it? Sweet. So it also was slightly more affordable than the giant survey. So when you do that human approach, when they see how excited their unit gets, and then the data we gave them, they used for like 3 years. So instead of running a survey where the data may or may not have as much longevity, that's how we showed value, and that's how we changed culture. And then that started to get used more. And then they started having a lot of people at the unit like using this language, more utilization of the chaplain. They were more willing to go to other resources. Like, so we saw a lot of value, but we were really surprised by how much leadership was like, yes, we really like this. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, it's perfect.
I know Drew still has more on that, but I just want to check something to be sure. You've mentioned you were doing this work with Chris, former podcast guest. You said 724th. Are you referring to 724th Special Tactics?
Yes.
Is there like a document that was written after this, like capturing the value they drew from it?
Yeah, so we did a full report. I don't know how public it's gotten, so like we handed it to the client, so it's as shareable as they want it to be shareable.
Okay.
But I could talk basics because we did present on a couple posters.
That's the kind of thing we talk about, like lessons learned and best practices in this space a lot. And most, like if I hear those words, I almost always have a stroke. I just like lose my mind.
What do you mean?
Because like none of these are like actually validated best practices. They're usually lessons we have not actually learned, and that's why we're talking about it. We're trying to convince people to learn it. But this seems like an obvious example of like a unit figured out a model of spiritual fitness intervention that genuinely worked for like a special operations unit that didn't cost that much, that was like clearly defined.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the force doesn't know it happened or what the value was.
Right.
Funny
and
how
I
that
think,
works.
yeah, I mean, that's a great summary of it. But yeah, there is, I might have a copy of the physical. I'll see if I can like shoot it your way. Again, I don't want to like overshare because we handed it over to them, but it exists. And we found like what I can share generally about it was we found, I think it was about 10 specific like components of what they would call spiritual fitness, like how they would recognize it. What it looks like for them, the language they would even use. So like we found if I can share this because it was on a poster, we found if they used a word like grounded, that had not just a mental component, but a spiritual fitness component. So that gave an avenue for psych, spiritual work, and even social to kind of pop into, like those avenues to come in of like, okay, grounded, what does that look like for each domain? Because it popped up for us. But yeah, so there's a report. I'll see if I can find it.
We can also, like you said, you gave it to the customer. It's up to the customer how much it gets circulated.
Yeah.
sounds like homework for Drew and I is to like find a contact at 724th and be like, listen, are you willing to share? Because it'd be good for the community.
Yeah. Because I know we were trying to get it into DTIC, and then like PCS happened and reshifts happened, so I don't know if it ever made it in there. But another piece of that too, and something I share, if you're really wanting to do like building H2F teams and like wanting to do some really solid work, but not fall into the best practices, I say with air quotes, you also have to think about hard from a methodology standpoint, how generalizable are you trying to make it? Like from the start, we set the expectation up of like, this may not even go to other Air Force unit. Like this is very specific to your people, but it'll be highly utilized for your people. So there's a little bit of high risk there because we were like, and as you know, the military, they want everything to be as generalizable as possible and like get the most bang for your buck. And my attitude was, no, we're going to make the data do the most work it can, and this data only applies to this population. That doesn't make it less valuable; it just makes it less generalizable. Which
that's a big one for us. Everybody wants copy paste template. Like we came to this from the strength and conditioning angle, but it works just as well for this conversation. Everybody wants copy paste templates, like a program you just go do. What we want people to embrace is we want like frameworks, like principles.
Yeah.
Like I don't care what the like actual product you used with 724th was. I care about the process of how you designed it to be culturally suitable for that organization.
Yeah.
Because that's something that social workers and chaplains and people on other teams, even if they don't do exactly what you did for 724th, they should know what principles and frameworks set you up for success in that setting.
So, yes. So then it was nowhere near full. I don't know how familiar you are with Dr. Rachel Chamberlain's capability-based blueprinting work. We had
weirdly familiar. It's a thing I rant about regularly.
Okay. Yay! She's amazing. I'm glad somebody like brings her up. But a lot of our focus group approach was using a very similar approach that we would do for the focus groups in the CBB. It's not a full CBB because those have like survey components, simulation, like we get to know the population we're working with.
Can I do a quick CBB sales pitch?
Yeah. Oh, please. Yeah.
I think it's only been done in the Air Force so far. I don't think any other branch has used it that I know of. Designed within CHAMP, as far as I'm tracking. And the reason I think it's super relevant to discuss is the military right now is like kind of off the deep end already of giving wildly different units the same resources and expecting the same results, even though they're in different communities with different demands.
Mind-boggling.
Okay. Yeah. So what community-based blueprinting is a structured process for assessing the demands and requirements that a population has. And then that transitions into what interventions would be appropriate when they're struggling with various things that they might struggle with across the domains of health, wellness, and fitness. You can tell me how accurate or inaccurate that summary was, but I think more of the military should leverage that and then assign human performance resources where they're most appropriate based on what you find in a community-based blueprinting type process.
Yes. So excellent summary.
Well done, Alex.
Yeah. No, and yeah, I really hope we can get back to CBBs because they're amazing. Because like to give a little bit of a concrete example, I know we can share. Like when we worked with the maintainers, we worked with a few different of their units, and we kind of found one thing from the spiritual fitness angle that overlapped with actually medical utilization was there was an incredibly strong culture around the 3-man team, which is great for like efficiency and the things I saw 22-year-olds doing. I was like, I didn't know you could load a plane with that and that quickly. That's impressive and terrifying. Like you see what they go through, but you also see like they are not going to let down the other 2 people on their team. Like to the point where we had people not going to physical therapy or saying they had issues. Like, so we then like sat down with leadership and chaplain and social work and the medical assets and were like, emphasize the 3-man team, but be careful with how much, like it's too much of a good thing. We have kind of found not like a rigorous scientific point of diminishing return, but we had found enough exploratory qual data to show that there was one. So that less utilization of physical therapy didn't necessarily mean there was less need. Like, it might be an overemphasis on don't let your other teammates down. So that's kind of, it was great to us. We only found that at like one unit. Others didn't have the same. So then we were able to kind of get the communication going, and they were really able to write that incredibly quickly, which saved a bunch of, we're talking like rotator cuff surgeries got prevented, like doing some really good stuff at the individual airman level, but also at like the larger resource management level, if that makes sense. So
okay, so with not a ton of time left, I want to get to some of these. Man, I'm hesitant to even call these rapid fire because they're deep.
Are you going to go rapid fire? Because I got one more not rapid.
You go first. You go first. I'm going to organize my thoughts.
Okay. Drew's going to get staged. This, I do this often. I do not have a question here.
Staging.
I just have a statement.
okay.
But a lot of what we've discussed today has me thinking about, I don't know if you know the name Charles Vogel.
Libby, you would love him.
He wrote a book called The Art of Community. He's been on our podcast before. He's a Yale Divinity School guy who's very interested in like community building.
Ooh, she made a face.
I'm a Vandy Div grad. There's a thing. Ignore it.
No, I believe it. But I do not believe he does any actual chaplaincy work or like divinity directly related work. He does consulting on how to build community. That's what I understand his role is now. And the book is called Art of Community. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
And a lot of what he cued us in on, and again, I said I'm just going to like ramble here for a second and you get to respond, and I don't have a real question, but we talked about like the interplay of like nutrition, spiritual, social.
Yeah.
And he spends a lot of time, energy, and thought on the ritual of meals and like what the point is and what we're trying to achieve. And I do think we genuinely forget, like when we talk about fueling soldiers, we talk about macronutrients, we talk about calories, we talk about like how many liters of water per pound of body weight per hour of physical activity.
Right.
We distill it into the quantitative as though it is the same intervention if I give a person like a box with exactly the right macronutrients in it or sat them down with their squad around a table and ate the same meal. Like those are two entirely different things from like human performance outcomes. Charles made some fantastic points about like the places we go to have meals with people are almost literally perfectly designed to disrupt meaningful social connection. We surround them with TVs. We play music. We make it impossible to get like serious about the conversation. Again, I'm about to wrap up this without ever actually saying anything or setting you up to say anything. But like, I think we in this space dramatically underestimate the power of meals beyond the quantifiable macros you consume in that plate of food.
Yes. Also, like you've hit on one of my fun things. So like table theology is like an actual field of study.
Oh, no
look
way.
at like the theology of food, the theology of community with eating. Like it's a whole field.
That's sick.
Yeah. And I used like, so formerly my endorser was Baptist. I'm now moving humanist because switching it up.
Oh, I want to talk to you about that.
that might be a whole other podcast. But yeah, so the idea of food, and like one thing I'm particularly worried about, especially as we're like seeing this trend back, not only are our spaces this way, but like in the military, social media is one of the few ways people stay connected. And I'm really worried about the over virtual connection military members use. And then with the rise of things like skinny talk or like the vilification of food. So yes, emotional eating can have some negative psychological components. I don't want to downplay that. But we have forgotten the positives of emotion plus food. So like, I mean, there's a reason too. Like I always joke with my friends, if you see a chaplain walking up to you and you know him well, they're like, "Hey, buddy, I have your favorite coffee." You're about to have a long conversation. Like they're coming to you probably with a little bit of tough nut fluff, but they're coming with like your favorite beverage as a form of communication of like, I still see you as a human. Like but we're coming to have a chat. Like. So yeah, no. Anyways, totally agree. Like I now need to read this book, but like, yeah, it's a whole field of study. If you really want to nerd out, you can go do a 3-year Master in Divinity and study food and theology. Pretty cool.
I mean, I'm like really trying hard not to keep you on for 4 hours talking about like sacred spaces and the whole like we just recorded an episode not too long ago about basically what I don't know, Alex, what the podcast has changed our minds on or how we've changed since we started and blah, 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 blah. Point being, we set out to talk about, reps and sets and how to train soldiers and blah, blah, blah. And then conversations like the one we had with Charles Vogel happened and Newton at Google. And you realize, and maybe this goes back to the earlier point we were hitting about the chaplains kind of hitting that second and third level, but like we spend so much time talking about the quantitative, just the data and how to make humans act like robots and inputs and outputs and do the thing and create the intervention. And are they getting better or not? And then you have conversations and you realize like the way you exist at a table eating food does far more to improve the lethality, quote unquote, of a human than their deadlift. And maybe just for funsies, I'll ask you a question on the tail end of that. How do you make military human performance more about that and less about PT scores?
Oh, okay. So this is a conversation that happens all the time in my house. This is what happens when
Can I come over? Because we live pretty close to each other.
I mean, honestly, please, if you could come entertain my retired husband for a few
I
hours,
would love
I'd
to.
appreciate it. We're still in that first couple years of retirement, so I'm
There you
like,
go.
the Army's not sending you anywhere. I like it. It's weird. Oh, like what? No. So we've really found, at least for us, the getting back to like helping people find meaning that isn't. This is gonna be so bad. Well, our nickname for it is helping people avoid vet bro, but to kind of stay a warrior. So you don't want to just let people stay in the door kicker mentality, but help them mature into a warrior. Somebody who knows when do you put down the fight because you're good. Like you now need to go rest to recharge to be prepared for whatever comes later, but not in a hyper vigilant way. More just like this task is done. I now have time for my family. This will help me recover, or time for whatever. This will help me recover. So whatever comes next that I can handle. So we talk about it through that sense. So as cheesy as it sounds, my husband's favorite way of saying it is like to find his little moments of joy. So like, purposely just actually enjoying, like walking the dog is not a chore. He gets to bond with the dog and like see it be goofy and like enjoy the walk, like being intentional, taking time and understanding that all points of your performance are going to overlap. So you don't, be blunt, you don't have your shit together in your private life. You're not going to have it together in your performance work life either. Like, so that's how we take it out of the data and metrics and get into the quirky of like, you're not doing this just to do this. You're doing this because of something else. It may be you want to work 20 years and get out so your family's got great provision and we're talking generational change through education opportunities. Or you may do it because you really love it and now you want to move into a different field. Like you have a bigger goal. So situating it on that larger source of meaning and like finding things that bring you joy versus just doing a tasker, like getting out of that tasker mentality is really key. So.
Okay. I've staged my closers. These are okay. Where do we want to start with this? Okay, so if physical performance answers the question, can I perform? What question does spiritual fitness answer?
Oh, you're not coming up. Jeez, save that one for the end. Yeah.
I'll ask you a fun one next.
I'm going to give a chaplain thing. Okay, so I'm going to do a very chaplain response. I'm going to say sometimes it's okay to not have an answer, and spiritual fitness reminds you it's about more than answers.
Ooh, what an uppercut.
I will say, I've thought about this a lot. I think the fundamental reason for spirituality in my mind, and this is still an evolving idea for me, but humans need answers to questions. And we only have so much capacity for really hard questions.
Yeah.
And like spirituality helps us build a framework where we can like focus on the questions we're able to handle right now. and like let other things just be because we're not there yet on exploring them.
I think that's great because, like, I always say spiritual fitness kind of reminds you to rest. Like, it helps you with prioritization, what your real sources of meaning are, what your real priorities are, what your big, deep beliefs are. So it's like you say, you can't handle everything at once. Spiritual fitness is knowing how to not do that,
Interesting.
and also not
Okay.
having the answers to go back to the quant is quantified enough. We don't need more quant.
I want to ask you this one because I know I texted you about it before we got on.
Uh-oh.
Civilian spiritual care providers, should that be a thing?
So, okay, shameless plug because yes, it should, so I can be one.
that's, that's
Full,
fair.
full disclosure. But no, I absolutely think it should. And this is one of those times where, like, when I would work with military chaplains, I would always tell people and like emphasize, like, I am civilian trained chaplain. So I'm trained to work in hospitals. Like, my residency was on the psych unit at Virginia Commonwealth in the ER. So, like, niche skill set, limited. But I think having the civilian provider, it just makes sense because, like, I don't understand why it's only a militant. There's no, like, contractor option. There's a few. So I say that to say, because it's like an actual position in the military, they typically try to avoid billing with contractors. But also because the endorser piece gets really weird. I don't know the legal part, but like the endorser plus contractor piece, they do it over the VA, so I don't know why the DoD doesn't do it. But I've always thought having spiritual care providers who worked stateside or at the base, however you want to call it, like at the installations, so they could stay. They're not PCSing. You have continuity of care, continuity of community building, of resourcing, of networking. You've got a hub. It would free the military chaplains up to deal with what they got enough. Like, they don't need to be dealing with all of that back too. But freeing it up, pulling them in. But right now, we only do it for Catholic priests, really, because most of them don't qualify for age waivers because they're like 60. There's not a ton. The other component of why I wish we would, but I think also what makes it difficult, is how much goes in to just get what I call the baby chaplain, the entry-level chaplain. College degree, 3-year Master of Divinity. Typically, you're going to need clinical pastoral education, which is a 3-month summer internship followed by a year-long residency. And that just gets you to the gate to start earning your hours for board certification. So it's like you're looking at 7 to 8 years if someone speed runs it. But yeah, civilian, it would make sense because you would also get way more talent because you could pull in the chaplains who wouldn't meet, like, health. I would need like a waiver to be a military chaplain because I am blind to the point of terrifying. Like MEPS looked at me and was like, "No, good try. Like, you're blind." I'm like, "Yeah, I do that." But you would be able to access talent that might be older or second career because there's a lot of social workers, doctors. There's a lot of the doctor chaplain pipeline both ways is actually bigger than you'd realize. So you could access that talent. So I think it should exist, but I don't know why legally it's not pursued and if there's some sort of structure I'm missing. But I only know of one non-Catholic contractor chaplain that exists, and the unit had to do a ton of exception to policy.
See, I never even thought about that as a thing, but as soon as I was made aware of it, I was like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, because, like, overwhelmingly chaplains are older. Like, I'm very unique in that it was my first career.
Yeah.
Very unique. Most chaplains, if it is their first career, they're probably already in the military. So, like, there's not a ton of us. To give more context on why I think they should pull civilian spiritual care providers, because if you narrow down all the requirements to be military chaplain, we're already vastly understaffed on the military chaplain side. But like I started my Master of Divinity program with about 150 classmates at Vanderbilt. We graduated 52.
Jeez.
So yeah, like, so basically every year and I went to divinity school, a little different from seminary, but like, you're not graduating hundreds, you're graduating like 50 at a year, like, and then all of them are very different specializations. So like, historically chaplaincy wasn't a track. It was people who chose it in spite of. So like you weren't getting out of those 52 graduates, it wasn't like half are going to chaplaincy route. You might get 10. And then they're going to hospital or prison chaplain. So that out of the 10 choosing chaplain, you might get 5 going to the military. So just trying to get military there is already difficult. So yeah, opening up to the civilian providers, you would be able to kind of access more talent that, maybe couldn't meet the deployment requirements and the health requirements, but massive wealth of knowledge. If you have a nurse practitioner who became a chaplain
That's a
as
good
a
point.
second career, like bring them in on a team. Like that's another one, because that's the other beautiful weirdness of chaplains is we come with so many different backgrounds. Like my background outside of chaplaincy was research and library technician, so not a lot of chaplains talk those topics, but I fit right in at champ. So I think really looking at that as an avenue, but I don't know legally how it would work because I don't know how because you would still need the endorser, which if it were Libby's world and I had all the power in the world, I would get rid of endorsers as a requirement to be a chaplain and just say, like, if you want to do rituals for your tradition, you have to have the endorser. But if you just want to chaplain,
I see. Yeah.
you could come in without. Because then you could have humanist chaplains, atheist chaplains exist. I don't know why we don't have those, especially considering the atheist population in the military. Yeah. The UK's
You're
already
getting
got
dangerously
a
close to my original question about constitutionality of the chaplaincy.
Yes. So, yeah. It's trying. It is massively skewed to evangelicals, which is not great. They're trying to pivot that, but yeah. So I think the answer to pivoting that would be to actually open it up to civilian providers, because the other issue is like, if you look at how other religious traditions are skewed, like often overwhelmingly older, where they're what we call gray populations, so they're served by older clergy. So we're skewed because evangelical traditions are more often going to be younger, like they have a younger demographic, they have younger clergy people, so you can pull more because they can meet the requirements, the health requirements for military service. But like your average Methodist or mainline Protestant chaplain's going to be pushing 45 by the time they're senior pastor. So you're looking at age waivers. And then if you really want to have fun, go look at the Duke Clergy Health Initiative and you'll learn how unhealthy most clergy leaders are because of the job stress. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, we have some of the highest rates of suicide and heart attack in the professions. So,
Man, I didn't realize any of that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
let me
anyways, that's tangent.
I want to close you with an easy one, totally unrelated to anything we've talked about this whole time. It's the desert island question, Alex.
We already answered this question.
I'm curious, if you're on a deserted island, what's one piece of fitness equipment you would take?
Wow.
See, she's a thinker. I'm always
and
curious.
she can define fitness however she wants.
Exactly.
Pausing.
Take your time. It's a very important question.
It's just like, well, and also I'm glad you opened it up for how I define fitness as somebody with a few disabilities, because I was like, whoa. I really don't know, because that's such a good question.
Oh, thank you, Alex.
Not to ruin it, I was wondering if she was going to pick like a journal.
God, no.
I could have seen
journal?
that.
Oh, like for writing? No.
Spiritual fitness, right?
I get it.
So this is going to get into a niche interest and hobby of mine, but I do have weighted axes because I like to axe throw, and I used to be really good at knife throwing.
What?
So yeah.
Oh, man.
I would honestly, multi-purpose. I could trade.
Weighted axe.
It's weighted. Yeah, it's for throwing. So it's a training axe first. So it's a little bit more weighted, so it'll stick heavier.
See, we had pulled that question out of rotation for a while because so many people said kettlebell. We just kind of decided that was the answer to the question.
That feels like
a weighted axe.
You have to remember, I'm married to an 18 Bravo, so like the
That's
selection of fitness
fair.
equipment that it doubles as weaponry in our house is slightly disturbing. Our Amazon list has got us on somebody's watch list because it's very
That's
confusing.
awesome.
It's like throwing axes in religion and terrorism books is my Amazon order history.
I love that.
So yeah, for now I would bring weighted throwing axe.
Weighted throwing axe. Man, okay. Well, on that note, thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for diving into this. I now have more questions than answers, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, I'm happy I could provide maybe some minor existential crises. It's always my
This is
favorite
perfect.
thing to do. So yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Greatly appreciate it. It was fun. Yeah.
Team, welcome to the spiritual after party. Man, I'll tell you
she
what.
gets a specially branded after party and nobody else does.
Because she's close to the Lord. Maybe is preordained. I don't know. Welcome to the spiritual after party. I, for one, walk away from that episode feeling rather inspired because it feels as though we're scratching a little bit at that itch that we seem to have discovered in the last couple of weeks of like the human the human underpinning of human performance. Like, what even is that? Who's even looking at it? What words do you use? How do you explain it? How do you teach it to other pillars? What is that? Who would have thought it sits in the chaplaincy?
My main takeaway is that I think I repeatedly said community-based blueprinting when it's actually capability-based blueprinting. So I got to apologize for that.
You did say community-based blueprinting.
Yeah.
I think, you are.
Sorry,
correct.
Team. I think I did a good job of describing it, but I really screwed up on naming it.
We'll do an episode on it soon, so hopefully we'll get it right.
This is the thing I've been thinking about, though. In our data-driven world that we apparently now live in, there's this idea that you can't do anything or capture anything or have something be important unless you can constantly monitor it quantitatively.
Correct.
Enter wearables.
It's the quantified self.
Or like daily check-in surveys or force plates or bars, like all these things. And like, yes, most of those are in the physical domain because it's the most easily quantified. I wish I could get more people to like acknowledge that it is okay to like research a phenomenon quantitatively because you have to determine an effect size, but then leverage the thing you learned from that research in a very qualitative, squishy, individualized way where you don't track it and it doesn't have to be quantified. Like, I think that's how like most of human performance should work. We should, when we have to quantify it, we should do it in a discrete like research project setting. We don't need it to always be quantified to do it. Like, I think human performance teams should be able to chase the spiritual and the social and like the human piece of this thing, even if we're not going to produce data about it in every case, right? I think that will, if we have to always monitor or produce data, we will pigeonhole ourselves into primarily just the physical domain where we are already stuck.
I mean, man, it seems like Hammond's corollary just again and again.
It does.
Rearing its head. Might have been onto something, should have published it.
Should we define that for listeners who have not already heard it defined? Because you can't assume everybody's listened to every episode.
No, that's true. I guess if we just keep saying it, it'll become a thing. So, team, Hammond's corollary, I feel like I'm giving that symposium talk again. The idea is a riff off of the phrase, what gets measured gets managed. Business economics, that's kind of where that phrase lives. I don't know when I started looking at it from a different direction, but the corollary that I added on to the end of that is that what needs managing isn't always measurable, and did not intend for it to become sort of a core tenet in a lot of these conversations, but it seems to keep popping up its head. And full disclosure, somebody may have already come up with this concept and it just is called something different. But I think to bring this back to the conversation we just had with Libby, we hit on this specifically in some of those questions around the chaplain spirituality stuff, providing a really squishy but incredibly necessary qualitative framework upon which a lot of the quantitative stuff sits. And I think the point to drive home is that, like you just said, just because you can measure something doesn't mean it's the end all be all most important aspect of what you're pursuing. Oftentimes the things that you can't measure, and maybe even shouldn't even try to measure, really kind of get you out of bed in the morning, so to speak.
You didn't ask this, but I checked it just to be sure. Like, we have been socializing Hammond's corollary in various settings recently. I did Google Hammond's corollary. We are the fourth result, lethality measured versus applied.
Oh.
The rest of the top five, so the other four of the top five, are all George Hammond. It's sometimes referred to as Hammond's principle. It's sometimes referred to as Hammond's postulate.
Oh, that sounds cool.
It does sound cool. It is
postulate.
Insanely nerdy. George Hammond was a theoretical chemist.
That was my grandfather. He's not at all.
I figured. But the principle is that a factor stabilizing a reaction intermediate will also stabilize the transition state leading to that intermediate.
Absolutely. 100%. For sure. I've always thought that. It's good to hear. It's good to hear that a kinsman discovered the same thing. It's in our blood. I don't even know what you just said.
I don't either. It's really deep in organic chemistry. I don't understand it at all.
Well, what's not deep in organic chemistry, but nonetheless deep in our hearts, is Hammond's corollary, which, again, I think Libby kind of spoke to this. As I said when we closed up, more questions than answers for me in terms of where we might go next with this thread.
I think that is the nature of spirituality.
That's a good point. And she may be the one who can connect us to the elusive Alan Francis. We'll see.
I'm going to riff on, you said if like physical fitness answers the question of can I perform, what question does spiritual fitness answer? And I think the right answer to that is spiritual fitness doesn't answer the question. Spiritual fitness asks the questions.
There you go. I'm going to let us end on that because that was very deep. Alex's postulate. Thanks for hanging out, team. We will see you next week. Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.
This week's episode is brought to you by Teamworks. One dietitian, 3,500 service members. All of them receiving personalized nutrition plans. Teamworks gives service members access to personalized nutrition guidance at scale. Visit teamworkstactical.com today to learn more.